Hello and welcome to Our Brilliant Revel, celebrating the first anniversary of Our Brilliant Ruin. I'm Rachel J. Wilkinson, one of the designers of the game, and what you're going to see coming up is a conversation between me and Justin Achilli, where we talk about where the idea of Our Brilliant Ruin came from, as well as some of the projects we have going on with it, including the tabletop role-playing game and the audio drama Clonmore Heights. But speaking of tabletop role playing games, our live stream rolled a catastrophe and we didn't have sound for the first few minutes. So that's why I'm recording this new intro now. And to my deep regret, you will not get a chance to hear about Justin's unhealthy obsession with Downton Abbey, but you will get to hear about the factions and how they come into play. So that's where we're going to start. And thank you for coming to check us out. Please enjoy the conversation. Thanks so much.
The whole focus of it was actually much smaller than we finally shipped. In my head, this was all happening inside the estate. So the people we saw were the aristocrats themselves, and then there were kind of the support crew. And I wanted the unbonded. I know I'm one of those outsiders in there to be able to kick open the windows or come in and cheat at the card games when they're invited, stuff like that. So initially, the factions just had the aristocrats, and then we hired a designer who had this idea of what if there were more.
Who decided to kick open the doors? Yes. So I don't want to be stuck in an estate. Let's go all over the drum arc. Yes. Really, it was the true folk. I think it was. So we have this faction quiz, and I don't know. I know that they put the link up a few times now. You should definitely take the faction quiz. But I I love the true folk. I designed the true folk. And I wanted to be a true folk. And every time I take this faction quiz, I'm a Galdepark. I even helped write this thing, and I
Don't
still
argue with the universe, Rachel.
I know. I know. So, yeah, so then the true folk happened and the unbonded happened, and, um, I'll try not to embarrass Justin too much, but I do wanna talk about sort of the first day that we sat down and talked about this idea. So, Justin came in and said, "Hey, here's the idea. Here's what I wanna do. And I want to put it in this non-Earth setting. I don't want to carry over Earth problems into the thing that we're making. So we didn't want to have law. We didn't want to have any isms. We didn't want to have governments. And the government too was also important because we also wanted to keep player agency the focus. So we didn't want to have this thing where you go to the judge to adjudicate,
Mhm.
whatever conflict that you're having. You got to sort it out. So it was like no isms, no government, no religion, none of this. And he's telling me this, and I'm sitting here going, "What is this game about? Where is the like what can we even talk about?" And it was, I think I complained about that for a week about not having anything to fight over. And I remember having it one evening. It was like, "Oh, we're gonna fight over land." And at the point at which it became land and resources, that's where I think the true folk really took off and where those factions took off. Because I came in thinking about unbonded homesteaders, people that didn't want to be part of the system but still wanted to survive. And I think it really helped open up the world. I think it helped open up the conflicts and really started to make the class conflict and
Mhm. Mhm.
sociological role playing a lot more robust. I think that's a
Plus, I think one of the strengths of subtractive design, chip away everything that the game isn't. We know it isn't about this, and we knew, some other outside inputs affected the decision as well. Like I remember working on other games, there were systems where you would run around and basically do crime, and then the game became about fighting cops, right? Anytime there's a system where you gain attention, things like Grand Theft Auto, even working on I guess nobody's going to sue me. Like with the World of Darkness MMO, right? When you had to observe the masquerade, and anytime you broke it, the cops would come hassle you. And eventually, especially in a multiplayer environment, that just means cops are constantly pouring in, and the game becomes about fighting cops. So we wanted to set all of that aside. But really, even more important than that, what do the characters fight over, right? That question that kept coming up there. And we had long since decided that this is a game about human stories. We always
Mhm.
want people in the spotlight. And so, what are the people fighting over? Well, we can plug anything in there, but we knew we needed those factions because the factions give you something to belong to and therefore someone to oppose. And then, of course, by logical extension, when we've got the characters in these estates or holding on to this vanishing property, because the Dramark is being eaten away by the ruin, that's forcing that tension. That's putting people constantly on top of one another. That means those resources are dwindling. And so, what do they fight over? They fight over, what's left. And I think there are probably very few people, and a few non-ruined people in the Dramark who want to be jerks. Um, and so you're fighting over these things that you need and that I need, and so neither one of us is really right, and so the costs come to the fore. That's always one of the most interesting parts of conflict to me is
Well, and
what are the consequences here?
yeah, one of the things I was also gonna add is that we also wanted to get away from aristocrats or upper class people squashing everyone underneath them.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
that's we were tired. Tired trope of that. And so, one of the things when we're talking about the true folk, having the true folk have their own guild power, their own leverage. They have the leverage of contracts and manpower. And so it almost became, an equal partner. I don't know, partner's not a
Mhm.
great word,
Shared
but
spotlight, right? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and then the same with the unbonded because the unbonded are really the arm of justice in a strange way. They are the ones that are going to tear it down if it needs to be tear down,
I was
create
just about to
more
say, like, the whole
movements.
premise of aristocrats is unjust, right? Here's a
Yeah.
setting that's built on inequality, and so yeah, it's privileged and comfortable to be an aristocrat, but all of that is gotten ill.
Yeah. So beyond even just designing it, we also have to talk about the artists and other creatives who helped. So Justin and I did a lot of talking. Justin and I did a lot of fighting. What we kind disagreements. We could call them, but also we had folks that were creating art for the world. And Justin, why don't you talk about some of the character art that came out of that?
Yeah, when we first formed the company, I knew immediately who I wanted to work with as art director. I had worked with Andy before at Red Storm, which is a Ubisoft studio. He and I worked on some VR titles together. We worked on some projects that never kind of got their escape velocity together. Separately, he's worked on things like Mythic Quest over at Apple TV Plus, and I've always loved the look that he brings to things, and also he's so great to work with. Like I just implicitly trust him, right? I know once we know what the thing is, yep, that's what Andy's going to
He's
deliver.
also immensely kind, and so when he doesn't like your idea, you almost don't even know if he doesn't like your idea.
Well, and he thinks too in the spaces of the world, and I think that's part of it too. Like, what would this look like? What would a cup look like in the world? What would a book look like? What would a letter look like? And so that's where things like the guild crests come out and the
Mhm.
aristocratic coats of arms. These things were made to seal letters and things that you would physically have on an artifact in the world. And so like Andy there living in the details of the world was an excellent complement to Ephraim Palacios, who is our senior concept artist. And from the moment he started, oh my gosh, like these things were looking fantastic out of the gate, even as rough sketches. And I think that was because between both he and Andy, they immediately gravitated toward like period pieces that really elevated what we were looking for. Like
That
in
Downton
particular,
Abbey
J.C.
aesthetic, like,
Leyendecker, and yep,
they
yep.
pulled that in immediately.
Yep, absolutely. And so, every piece of art that came in, that's one of the reasons I love working with Ephraim is I mean, he'll take, please illustrate this, but when you turn him loose, he's like, oh, yeah, I thought through this, and here's this guy, and here's his sister in the background, and here they are doing this, and the baboon, right? When the baboon showed up in the illustration for Lady Catherine Valgrieve, and the baboon is named after one of her rivals, and she's dressing up the baboon because she's commenting that her rival is an A. Like, oh my gosh, this stuff is
Or
fantastic.
Precious. If we're gonna talk about the
Yep,
baboon, we gotta
yep.
talk about Precious, which is, modeled after Ephraim's pug real life
Gus.
pug
Yep.
dog. And so we have all of the precious living generations through throughout the families for
And
sure.
Precious has a speaking part in Clawmore Heights,
I
right?
know.
So
So let's talk about developing a story world where there are always new things. Why we wanted to create a terrarium.
yeah, yes, that's a great word for it, right? We aren't telling a linear story that must happen this way. We are building a container, and then we are inviting players to tell their stories in it, and we're inviting creative partners to tell their stories in it. More on that in a little while. We've built this world to be a container of stories, as opposed to here's the story and you get to observe it. And that is behind a lot of the systems design, because we do push those factions to the fore, right? When you think of certain games where like your class is kind of an occupation, and that's what you do, that's kind of your niche, your role in the game. One of the things that I loved about World of Darkness is that not only are those factions, the clans, the tribes, the traditions, etc., they kind of outline what you do. They inherit a set of verbs, but they also have a society built around them. They have a community built around them. So when you choose who you like to be, you get all these other people on your side automatically. So it's not just you against the world necessarily. And then, of course, where those different factions overlap and where they, fight over things, where the resources in common are, held more importantly by someone else, that's where those conflicts develop. And so, not only do you get to do what your character wants to do, you get all of the kind of values and conflicts that your society, your faction gives you as well. So that's a huge part of the world building right
Yeah,
there.
I think World of Darkness was a huge influence, obviously, for the both of us in being able to create these worlds. I also think your video game experience and my TTRPG and LARP experience also helped because we're used to wanting to play in the world and play
Hmm.
different
Hmm.
characters and do different things. And I think that was also important in creating this kind of immersive environment that people could tell a story in their own little corner if they, and explore their own conflicts. And also, I think that it's just, I don't know, it's just an easier way to interact with the world too. We're not following one specific character that you
Hmm.
either love or you hate, and you have to have a decision, you have to decide what you feel about it. Now
That's
you have multiple characters. Go ahead.
there's a world out there, right? You
Yeah.
find the thing in the world that draws you in, and it might be a family, or it might be a guild, or it might be the Siliconetics, or it might be I'm going to take it to the ruin, right? There's plenty of things for you to do and touch and change in the world, and that really is the invitation to the player there.
So, speaking of getting involved in the world, let's talk about the tabletop RPG, which why was that the first idea?
I love tabletop RPGs. I love playing them. I played one earlier today, like even before the streams were going on beforehand. I was at the local game store doing one of their events, running OBR, of course. And I think because we want to do so much more with our Brilliant Ruin as a world, a tabletop role playing game is a fantastic, it's an extremely highly valuable world Bible. You can give this to a player and say, here's what the world is about, here's what it looks like, here are the groups at play in it. And so for us, while we're working on other things internally, this also lets us put things in the audience's hands as well. So not only do devs get to see this, not only do people working internally get to see this, but the audience gets to see it and play it and tell their own stories. And because because games are an interactive medium, and we want people telling their stories, it's a great way to do that.
Yeah, and I think it is one of the easier ways for folks to connect to a story is when they're making their own, and it's a great way to learn about the world. It's also just, again, relying on our own experience. And I mean, making tabletops,
Now you're
that's,
taking the glamour off it, right?
I know, I don't mean to take the
We
shine
know how to
off of
make
it,
books and
but
print books and
you know, we spent a lot of time writing stories for them. And I also think we needed a system first. We needed to understand how conflict was resolved in a mechanical way and what that was going to look like and what it meant to be narrative driven because we could come in and have an idea and it's so interesting as we were exploring and continue to explore different corners of how to tell stories in this world where we run into things we need to solve, and having a very good understanding of the ways in which we would like to solve these problems, I think is very important for projects in general too, and the tabletop RPG. But yeah, I remember developing the the our note here says design iterations if they only knew. I often said to Justin we were gonna go around the world to end up back home again. Just because it felt like we would start at a place, I would go off, spend a week, spend 2 weeks trying to come up with mechanics or things that we needed to do, and the thing was is that we wanted it based on emotion and
Mhm.
passion.
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
was not gonna be a game that was gonna be based on your physical, strength or dexterity or stamina. It was gonna be about motivations. Why are you doing this? Why is this important to you? And so, we had I don't know, 3 or 4 different ideas of how to shove emotion into this thing, and what it came down to and we started out with sort of a fungible system, and they said, "Well, no, no, we wanna try to do this other thing with emotions," went totally around the world to end up back at passion. So it was well, because we couldn't force people to feel an
To
emotion.
feel what they said they were feeling. Yep.
Right. So
Yep.
the one of the original
I don't
ideas
know,
is
I'm
that
doing this out of love because I get 3
yes,
dice for it, right?
yes, and so it's like I have a 3 in love, so because well, the part that was interesting was that you could be consumed by love, you could be consumed by hatred. So if you had a 3 in love, then you sort of know what that character is. You know somebody that's gonna lead from the heart. You know that what that is, but we couldn't get a player to feel love. It was just, "I have a 3 in love, that's my highest score, I'm gonna
Yep.
roll the dice."
Yep.
But we were able to create situations in which people could feel intensely about the moment. And that's where passion came into it. We decided we weren't going to dictate what emotion you were supposed to feel, though those sort of did kind of morph into the personality part of the character sheet. Um, Passions really sort of became that moment of I really need to succeed,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
this is very
It's the
important to
press your
me.
luck, it's the double down. Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't you talk
Um,
in specific about the mechanic system?
I was gonna say previously there were specific passions and you measured yourself in terms of love or anger or fear, and both of these had a positive and a negative effect. But again, because we couldn't get the players feeling those, we moved those over into, well, a player is defined by their personality, right? So we care about how they're accomplishing this thing. In some cases you might have a strong character trying to, fix the problem by breaking a thing apart, or a quick character by dodging it. And so we wanted that. We wanted the player to be able to say, I am X as a descriptor. And that's where we knew we wanted those dice pools to be, in the player's power to say, I'm approaching it this way. And because it talks about their approach and their emotional state as opposed to the emotion they're invoking, that I think becomes much more flexible. I can act out of loyalty angrily or lovingly or
Mhm.
cunningly, and so that becomes a more powerful kind of general level descriptor. So the personality there forms the basis of the character.
And would you like to help assist in tamping down the controversy over the 50-50 Brill Gloom split that, everyone we're getting a lot of questions about, people who are very good at math, are saying there's not really your success is not more likely than not succeeding. And I'm purposely saying not succeeding because one of the things that we wanted to get away from was this idea of failure, that we were using the element of chance in the dice roll to give a consequence or a resolution that you expected or didn't expect. So why don't you also talk about passions and how that factors into
Yeah, yeah. I mean that 50-50 isn't actually true, right? You've only got if you're just looking for sixes or ones, you're much less likely than 50-50. And so if you want to succeed at something, for the love of God, use your passions, right? That's the game system that's there to kind of push things in your favor. It gives you extra dice and it increases your success threshold there. And it has that risk mechanic on the back end. Um, but failure is interesting and not success is interesting, and when you look at the stories that form the basis of the genre, like going back to Downton Abbey again, in the first season, spoilers, I guess, 14
Spoiler
15 years
alert,
after it.
it's been
um,
10 years.
that Lady Mary fails to hide the fact that she's got a dead lover, who died in her bedroom, and Edith, her sister, fails to hide the fact that she was the one who ratted out Mary, right? And so the conflict is coming from this, right? So it's not like, well, Mary should have just snuck the character away. Okay, well, then we'd miss out on the rest of the season happening. And so consequences become very important. And so, having a game system there that gets you to lean into the consequences, it doesn't have to be that you fail to do the thing and nothing happens. One example might be I'm trying to get the information from a rival in another faction, in another aristocratic family. And then, I pay the costs or whatever, and I fail the roll, and one of the Peacock's Feast overhears me, right? Or one of the Piedmont Accord, the Peds, one of the Peds hears me. And so now basically I've given them a story. I still got the information. I've just
Right,
helped them.
but they got it
And
for
so that's not
free.
a failure, right? I've just
Yeah,
given somebody something for free. And now I get another, storyline out of it.
yeah. Well, moving on from the tabletop, let's talk about our other project, Clawmore Heights, and why we were doing an audio drama. We were doing an audio drama because it was me and because I'm sitting here and saying this is a thing I know how to do. But one of the things that audio drama is good for is showing stories and showing how we want stories to unfold in playing Our Brilliant Ruin. And it also helps make an easy in for teaching people about the world. They don't necessarily need the book. They can come in and I specifically it says experiences here from Port Saga. I created Vampire the Masquerade Port Saga. I don't know if any of you have listened to it. You should. It's great. But one of the things that I was doing in that is I was making it for the person who has never played. So a lot of people that the players that did play in Vampire would have their partners or spouses. They're in the car. They're saying, "Hey, this is the thing I play. I want you to listen to it." And then they could kind of have a way to talk about it and not necessarily having to play it. So this is one of the reasons that Clawmore Heights was also important because we understood that we were going to be introducing a story world that had strange rules,
Mhm.
different expectations, and we wanted to have an illustration for people not to fall back on what we know on Earth and our reality.
Mhm.
One of the
Mhm.
best examples is this is based on it is technically a courtroom drama. And so Clawmore Heights is a courtroom drama about a thing that happened. And it's spooky, and there's strange things afoot at Clawmore Heights, but we didn't wanna have lawyers and judges and prosecutors, and that's probably one of the hardest things to capture about Our Brilliant Ruin, or one of the most difficult things to understand is that there is no law, there is no government, and we are so used to falling back on the police and falling back on all of these
Instruments of state
systems.
violence putting things in order.
Yes, 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 that's a one way to put it. So we have the guild doing it instead. We have a True Folk Crown Hall College guild saying, "Did you violate the ethics of our guild by the actions that you took? Are you still one of us? Are we still going to back you? Are we still going to give you leverage in your negotiations with contracts with aristocrats?" Because one of the perils of becoming unbonded or being taken from the guild is that they're no longer going to back you. So now
Mhm.
you're on your
Mhm.
own, and you may be uh restricted from access to tools and education and libraries and teams and all of your sort of resources, and you're scrapping around on your own again. So it was very much about illustrating one of the more difficult things to wrap your brain around. And then obviously it was showing off the drama. Like, I wanted to tell a ghost story. I'm not gonna put any like haughty spin on it. I was just obsessed with telling a ghost story.
Well, and I think it also the ghost story becomes interesting in the details of the world that it shows us as well. It's set up as an inheritance drama, right? This is a family
Yeah.
saga. Something's happening here, and it's very different from the earthly expectations, because all this stuff isn't just going to go to the oldest son. We see some of the drama unfolding here, like who's going to get this, right? Is Josephine going to end up in charge? Is Stellan going to end up with it? Does Lucas make a dark horse play? Is it somebody else out of left field? Does Lord Tiberius fall in love with Agatha?
Yes, because inheritance didn't matter. You didn't have to be the firstborn son of the
Yep,
anything. They
yep,
could have left it to an unbonded, and it wouldn't have mattered.
yep, yep.
So it's a question that still is hanging in the air, and you should listen. I think episode 6 comes out this week, so you can catch up on the first half now.
Does Agatha end up with the house?
You have to find out. Yes, you have to find out. Shameless plug. But it was also, let's talk about the ghosts though, because this is a ghost story, and ghosts are weird in Our Brilliant Ruin. And so it one of the things that we were doing was exploring what these creatures and monsters sound like.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
ghosts was very difficult because the ghosts in Our Brilliant Ruin are really based on a need. What is their emotional obsession? And they are also captured by this light, this ruined light. So they are almost photographs or videos or, but it was
mhm,
this
mhm.
sort of flash in time, this moment in time. And so we didn't want to have dead corpse ghosts,
Yeah, I mean they're not traditionally undead, right? They're not ooh ghosts.
right. So it was playing with lots of sounds, but lots of the sounds also they were suggesting time. So there's clocks in there, there's
Hmm, hmm.
reversed footsteps, there's a sense of confusion about I know one of the things is that there I was playing with was that there was this sort of bubble around the ghost where everything kind of warps out of time and
There's
space.
there's a brittleness to the ghost too. There's a sense that like breaking glass, or if this is that moment in time and the moment starts to stress fracture.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Clonmore Heights available now. Make our marketing person very happy by subscribing on YouTube. But I will also be totally fine with you downloading on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you get your podcasts. So shout out Danny. So anyway, let's go on and let's talk about the future. And we also have more tabletop content with the Whisper coming out. You just did an on-site event today. How did that
Hmm,
go?
hmm. It went great. We did an original story. We had a cosmopolitan group. That's one of the things that comes up a lot. Do players like to play all aristocrats or all unbonded, trying to tear things down? This one was a little bit of everybody, but everyone had a secret on everyone else. And so it eventually ended with the true folk very angry at the residents of the estate. But of course, this is
The
all
true
drawn on
folk just
Gothic
wanted
literature
stability
anyway,
and
right?
order.
So,
And if everybody just listened to them, it would have been fine, right?
well, well, they want comfort more than justice, I think. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, we also have a community license available where you can make your own content in the world.
Yes.
Um, Go ahead. We have resources for that.
super important to me, right? If you go to the website, you can see the license and the terms of how you can create and use the world of OBR to tell your own stories and even make money from that if you choose to. One of the things that I want us to do eventually is make available the Whisper magazine format, so you can kind of release your own issues of the Whisper. And we have a couple of thoughts on that as well. The Whisper is a great piece of in the world stuff, right? These are magazine excerpts from an in world magazine, so you get a sense of gossip, or you get a sense of, oh, here's what the people eat, here's how they live, here's a story of their lives. I want to do a complement to that. I want to do a magazine called Venture, and Venture will have, it'll be the exact same format, but this will be more on the game side. So this will have, rules, expansions. It might contain stories that you can kind of go into and tell with your table, with your group at the table. It may have a new a ruined creature type. Of course, one thing that's ripe for more exploration is the estates themselves. So a kind of not in the world, but still very useful partner volume to that. And of course, I'd love to make that available for the community license as well. So, make the things that you want, tell the stories that you want, and even make a buck or two doing it.
Oh, yeah. So Clonmore Heights season 2, well, you should let us know if you would like it. You need to go listen to it and then tell me it's great and that we need more. That is your job right now.
The
So
more listens we get, the more
the
likely
more
season
listens,
two
the more
is.
likely,
So.
yeah, we get to do it again. And there is more coming in 2025. Do you want to do the reveal, Justin?
All right. In early 2025, we are releasing with our partners at Dark Horse Comics a 3-issue comic series called Horror at Crane Mansion. I can't tell you the actual dates. All of that stuff is still up in the air. I don't want to tell you who's involved or what's about. We're going to do some more of that in the weeks upcoming, or in the time upcoming. But here is the title. It is a 3-issue series. It will be out early in 2025. And what I like about this is another way to kind of get into the world, right? This is another way to see how things are in the Dramark. One of the things I like about Clawmore Heights is it shows us how to do long form storytelling.
Mhm.
And this, because it's a 3-issue series, gives us a good mid form storytelling. How to pace things, how to introduce new characters, how to spike the tension. So I've seen this, I've read the scripts, I've seen the pencils, I've seen the colors. Oh my gosh, I love this comic series. I can't wait for it to be out there in people's hands.
All right. So we're going to do some questions and answers for the last few minutes. And if our lovely Victoria will let us know perhaps how many minutes we have to do this, that would be amazing. But if you do have questions, please drop them in. The aforementioned Danny is going to help get them over to us to be able to answer. In the meantime, though, we do have some questions that we grab from our Discord, which you should also join the Discord. If you would like to have very personalized all OBR, Our Brilliant Ruin time,
All
like,
access.
yes, this is, please join the Discord. We're all of us are always chatting in there. So, in Clawmore Heights, we see a true folk being threatened with unbonding because of misconduct, without regard to the player-oriented class. For a moment, how bad is that? Could she join a different guild if she wanted? Find another way to apply her skill set? Or is unbonding societally the same as ostracizing, self-inflicted or otherwise? So unbonding is a losing access to the leverage and resources of the true folk, which in itself is bad. Depending on how you look at it. I mean, like if you want to have access to these things, if you want some comfort, if you would like to have some security, stability, um, being a true folk is a really great way to do that. But if you are unbonded and removed from the guild, life gets hard. You are on your own. You are trying to make it without having this sort of access. But
If
you could
if the
find
hook
another
for
way
the
to
for the
apply. Oh,
I was going
sorry.
to say, if the hook for the true folk is their competency, and a lot of their tools for that competency are taken away through being booted from the guild, that's going to make it very difficult for them to realize that thing they do.
But you can absolutely apply the skill set in the unbonded.
Hmm. Hmm.
Transferring guilds, that would be an interesting story. It would sort of depend on the context around that character. But if the character was leaving one guild and becoming unbonded from one guild, but had some sort of value that
Hmm.
another guild
Hmm.
might use, that whether they were a political pawn or, I mean, that could be possible.
I mean, going to that other guild, they're going to have to trust you to welcome you, right? And if they know that you've been unbonded, they may be less inclined to take you in. On the other hand, if you've got something that's really valuable to them, it's almost like a political defection where I'm going to leave the academics and I'm going to go to the contractors over in the Piedmont Accord. Or, I've had enough of this bohemian art lifestyle. I'm going to go and take the safe check
Leaving
from
its enclave,
the
yeah.
the League of Glove and Key, right? And so, leaving a guild doesn't necessarily mean that you are unbonded, but unbonding is definitely a significant. It's how society says for those who are unbonded, as opposed to those who choose it. Society says this person's not playing by the rules. We're going to push them outside.
Right, right. And the unbonded would have a completely different perspective on this, though.
Of
So,
course, of
yeah,
course, and without law, right? This is purely a social punishment. This is the community saying we're sticking you
we
outside
don't trust
now.
you. You violated some sort of expectation or trust so badly
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
that is a mark on
Which is
you.
wild because there are some unbonded characters like Lowenna Turner I would happily trust all day long. Would I trust Angus Trapp? Less so.
So, absolutely. So on the website, it mentions a video game in production. Can you talk about that at all?
We have a video game in production. Uh,
Ta-da!
I don't want to say anything, not because I'm being coy, but because we are in the. It's not actually in production. We're in pre-production right now. So there's a lot that the video game has yet to find out that it isn't, and I don't want to lead anyone into thinking that it is a certain thing. I won't even talk about the game type, right? But one of the things that you can know that we plan to remain true to is that the Dramark is a place where you tell your story, and so we are building a game that wants to put a lot of things in the player's hands to see what their story in the Dramark is like. If you're interested in working on a video game, you can see we periodically put up roles that we're hiring for, which is why it's no surprise here, right? We've got the listings up there. I'm not trying to be evasive or anything, but yep, we are working on it. What time is it coming? It's coming at some point in the future. I'll be even more vague about that than the
Yeah.
comic book. But this is because we want to to do it right. We want to fulfill every degree of promise that OBR makes for the Dramark and to the player.
And finally, is there a single best jumping in point for new people looking to get into the world of our brilliant ruin? Clonmore Heights. Thank you very much. And scene.
I love this question because the answer is it depends on what that new player, that new person is trying to do,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
One of the things I love about Colombo Heights is that it's so easy to get into. I listen to it when I go on my walks, or when I'm going out to pick up something from the store. I listen to it on the way. It's the perfect length for like a digestible bit of something. It doesn't, unlike a tabletop role playing game, it doesn't require 2, 3, 4 hours to sit down and do. That said, it's telling me a story, and so if you want to use the Dramark to tell your story, one of the points of ingress might be the TTRPG, right? If you want to immediately jump in and start saying, "Oh, I would, oh," and then I would, then you want the TTRPG, right?
Right.
It
Right.
requires a little more, investment on the player's part, and especially on the GM's part. It's collaborative. You're going to need some more people. But like questions like this are why I love the studio's transmedia approach. So not only is Clawmore Heights going to be a great way to experience the world in a traditional linear media way, so will the comic book. I would love to do fiction someday too,
Yeah.
right? A way for just to have a short story in the Dramark or a longer series. Maybe it's a trilogy, tetralogy. Maybe it's Game of Thrones and a TV show spins out of it. Who knows? But
I want the television show. Yeah. So that's the one thing about Clonmore Heights. Clonmore Heights is also proof of concept. Anyone that would like to make a television show. Uh, Gosh, is there anything else that you want to say before we close up today?
not for me. I don't want to kind of sell anybody anything, but I do want to thank the audience for coming here and being with us today. Like,
Oh,
one of the
absolutely.
reasons we get to do this is because of y'all out there, watching, reading, buying, telling your own stories. So thank you for spending your time with us. This really makes it all worthwhile. I grabbed a still from one of the games that people were playing earlier, and that still has like everyone's got their face is so animated. And again, this was one of the failures, right? And everyone's like, "Oh, this is great! I just
Right.
made a complete catastrophe of things." Ah, I love that, man. Game designer serotonin, right there.
Well,
What
it is
about you? What do you want to send people home with?
well, I think I just wanna piggyback off that to say it is really hard to start something new. It is a very difficult thing to start something new, and to have people invested in it is important, and it's also a good feedback tool for us. If people are having fun, we're doing it right. If people are not, we need to review some things.
Fix things.
Yeah, so, it's always good, and for me, I just love people talking about it, just being like, having their own stories and having characters that they want to it's really exciting to see something that you create made manifest in the
Hmm.
world,
Hmm.
and that there are people picking up and getting it and being excited about it. And I will say, we had a little Gen Con. You could see the book, buy the book, get the book, and seeing people's faces when they opened up the book. Another shout out to the art team. It's a beautiful book. It's just beautiful, and so people, I don't know, it's good. It's nice seeing it.
And,
But
and I also, before we go, I do want to thank Pam Punzalan as well,
oh
who helped
yeah,
us with the design. One of her great ideas that I think really helps realize the Dremark is that sense of lost history, right? That's her
hmm
idea that the further back we go, the less sure we are of it. And that means we don't know our history. We're less sure of who we are, and especially since we know we're running out of time in the future, that makes the loss of the past all the more poignant. And so I was so like in those conversations with her, and she did the history chapter too. That coming to the fore feels like, yeah, this piece was missing, right? This was not quite there. If we could go through and perfectly have knowledge of the past, a lot of the mystery would be gone. A lot of the
right.
questions would be answered, which is, games are about finding a question and seeing what comes of it, as opposed to, this must happen here. But enough of me ranting, right? Let's
We'll
talk
need to
about
do
what
this
comes up
again.
next.
Yes, I mean, that's the whole thing. We need to have the Rachel and Justin live show as we